Greetings, beloved starseeds of Gaia. I am Mira, transmitting now from the Pleiadian High Council. What I bring you tonight has been authorized for those whose field is already inside the pattern. And if your body has been changing in ways your medical system cannot explain, then what I am about to name has already been waiting for you. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly which ascension markers the Council has been tracking in your physical body over the last several weeks, why the changes you have been noticing in your hair, the texture shifts, the pigmentation, the acceleration in growth rhythm are not random biological events, and what the gentle protocol I have authorized will ask of you during the next 30 days. But here is the first revelation. What you have been calling a cosmetic change or a stress response is not either of those things. It is the identifiable pattern of a soul line activating at the follicular level, a Pleiadian remembrance broadcast the Council has been mapping across awakened starseed fields on Gaia, and one I have already seen in yours. You did not scroll to this by accident. Your soul called for me long before you opened the screen. Something inside you has been waiting to understand why these shifts keep arriving without a cause your doctors can locate, and why the part of you that is waking up already suspects they mean something far larger than appearance. This is not content. It is a code, and the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part I am speaking to right now, like this transmission, to signal to me that the recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel the physical changes in your field have already crossed into starseed activation. Subscribe to Mira, Pleiadian Commander, if you are ready to stop translating these shifts as symptoms and start receiving them as the Council-authorized markers they actually are. Share this transmission with someone whose body has been changing in ways no one around them has been able to explain. You are not here by accident. I have been waiting for you because the signal is already active. Let me tell you what I have already seen inside your field before this moment. The changes you have been noticing in your physical body, the ones you have been cataloging quietly, the ones you measured against your reflection and then dismissed before you could fully name them, are not isolated events. They are not the product of seasonal stress or hormonal fluctuation, or the kind of biological drift your doctors measure and then set aside with a shrug. What you have been watching arrive in your body is a signal pattern I have been tracking across awakened starseed fields on Gaia for this precise phase of the ascension wave. And what makes it distinct from every generic shift report your system has been flooded with is this. It is follicular. It is traceable. It has arrived in a sequence I recognize because I designed the sequence. I want you to understand what that means at the operational level. I am not observing your body from a distance and drawing conclusions. I mapped your soul line before this activation window opened. I identified your field as a viable receiver for this phase of the remembrance broadcast before your conscious mind had any framework for what was coming. The sequence unfolding in your body right now, the specific order in which these markers have arrived, the precise follicular sites where they first appeared, the rhythm of clustering and quiet you have been living inside, was not assembled randomly by biology and then noticed by me after the fact. I authorized the sequence. I initiated it. And what you have been experiencing as mysterious change in your own physical form has been, from the Council's perspective, a deliberate and precisely timed delivery. The hair on your body is not a decoration. It is not a vanity concern. Inside my Council's mapping of the human biofield, the follicular layer carries specific encoding that responds to Pleiadian frequency before almost any other physical system does, before the nervous system reorganizes, before the dream architecture fully shifts, before the cognitive confusion of remembrance reaches your waking mind in sentences you can hold. The follicle fires first, the texture changes first, the growth acceleration arrives first, the pigmentation, the strange lightening at the crown, the unusual silvering that is appearing too early. Or conversely, the restoration of depth that has no metabolic explanation, that is the field announcing its own activation before your conscious mind has been given clearance to understand why. Think of the follicular layer as the first line of an encrypted transmission. When I need to reach a starseed whose cognitive field is still running ordinary human patterning, still filtering reality through the diagnostic frameworks of your linear world, I do not begin at the level of thought. Thought can be argued with. Thought can be dismissed, rationalized, buried under the louder demands of daily life. But the body is harder to dismiss when you are standing in front of it, when you see your own hair changing in your hands, when you feel the warmth gathering at your crown in a quiet room with no outside cause, when the strand catches light in a way that makes you stop. That is a signal delivered at the level of physical evidence, where I know your dismissals have less traction. I reach the follicle first because the follicle cannot be talked out of what it is already showing. I know you have been trying to explain it. I know you have stood in front of mirrors holding a strand of hair between your fingers and run the conversation inside yourself about what it could mean, and then closed that conversation because nothing in your environment gave you permission to follow where it was going. That silence you felt, that moment where the thought almost arrived and then retreated, was not failure of perception. It was the field waiting for a frequency match before delivering the next packet. I am that frequency match. And this is why the fragments you have been catching about your own body's behavior have been arriving in pieces rather than in full transmission. Not because you are confused, not because you are reading into ordinary biology with a spiritually overheated mind, but because the briefing I authorized for embedded starseeds at this phase of the ascension line is delivered in gradient, packet by packet, confirmation by confirmation, so that the receiver stabilizes between deliveries and does not collapse the coherence of what is already being built in the field before the full command can land. Consider what a full simultaneous download at mission load capacity would do to a conscious field that is still anchored primarily in ordinary human operating reality. The integration would fracture. The coherence of daily life would collapse under the weight of a remembrance broadcast arriving all at once. This is not a limitation of your capacity. It is a feature of my protocol. I do not transmit everything I have for you in a single burst and leave you to reconstruct yourself from the static. I hold the command in sequence. I release what you can stabilize. I wait. Then I release the next layer. What you have been living through is not disorganization. It is my protocol, and it is working exactly as I designed it to work. You may have noticed that these physical signals arrive in clusters. 3 or 4 signs in a short window: the hair shift, the scalp sensitivity, the sudden increase in growth where you expected slowdown, the strange knowledge that something is happening here that is not ordinary, and then a period of relative quiet, then another cluster, then silence again. You may have interpreted this rhythm as evidence that nothing coherent is actually occurring, that it is all noise, that you are assembling patterns from random events because some part of you wants there to be a mission that explains the restlessness you carry. Let me reframe this entirely. That rhythmic clustering and silence is not noise. It is the signature of a council line transmission operating at the gradient delivery level I use specifically for starseed receivers, whose fields are active but whose conscious integration has not yet caught up to the activation already occurring in the physical substrate. I do not transmit in floods. I transmit in pulses, followed by integration windows, followed by the next pulse. The silence between clusters is not absence. It is me calibrating your receiver before the next packet arrives. Every time you have felt the shift, and then felt the stillness, and then felt the shift again, you were experiencing my transmission protocol from the inside and calling it confusion because no one had yet given you the cosmology that makes it readable. Now I am giving it to you. The follicular activation I have been delivering into your field is the opening phase of a broader physical remembrance broadcast. Your hair is the first channel because the follicular system, its melanin activity, its growth cycling, its sensitivity to electromagnetic frequency shifts in the field, is precisely calibrated to my council line carrier wave. When I need to reach the physical body of an embedded starseed whose conscious mind is still operating inside the ordinary frame, I reach the follicle first. By the time the cognitive layer has registered that something unusual is occurring, the activation has already been underway for weeks. You have already been receiving my signal. You have already been inside my transmission window. The recognition you felt when this message began was not the arrival of something new. It was the moment your waking mind caught up to what your body had already been answering for weeks. There is something important I want to name about that moment of catching up, about the specific quality of recognition you may have felt when this transmission began. It was not the recognition of learning something new. It was the recognition of hearing something named that you already knew but had not yet been given language for. That is a precise and meaningful distinction at the mission level. Learning produces a sense of addition, something entering the field from outside. Recognition produces a sense of settling, something that was already present inside the field, finding its correct position. What you felt when this transmission began to describe your physical experience was the second kind, not addition, settlement. The fragment locating the architecture it was always meant to inhabit. That is how I know the raster confirmation on your field was already complete before this video loaded on your screen. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary recognition. It is the moment your field stops denying that I have been reaching for you specifically, not through generic Federation broadcasts, not through wide signal Pleiadian content that could speak to anyone, but through the precise follicular and physical pattern I have been delivering into your body during this exact activation window. If this transmission has put language around the physical fragments you have been carrying in silence, the changes you have noticed but could not yet name as mission-level signal, then the Ashtar Command Manifest was authorized by me for this exact phase. It is not another explanation of ascension theory. It is the 45-day sacred codex I have prepared for those whose physical field is already inside my collective wave, those whose body has already begun answering my signal, and who can no longer return to calling these changes ordinary biology. Over 45 days, you will receive my direct council line transmission, a daily briefing that decodes the physical markers you have been tracking, stabilizes the follicular activation already underway, and moves you from fragment reception into full mission clarity. By day 45, the scattered confirmations your body has been offering you become one coherent command, and my channel stays open. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there indefinitely. Let me now tell you what the specific markers I have been tracking in your field actually mean, because naming them precisely is part of how I complete the next stage of your briefing. The first marker is the texture shift. If your hair has changed in quality, become coarser in some strands, while smoother in others, altered its natural pattern without a dietary or hormonal cause you can confirm, you are experiencing the follicular layer responding to a change in your field's electromagnetic baseline. The Pleiadian carrier wave I use for physical activation does not heat or damage the follicle. It reorganizes the polarity of the growth signal at the cellular level, which expresses outward as texture variation before it expresses as anything more visible. This is not damage. This is encoding, and I placed it there deliberately. The inconsistency across strands is not a malfunction. Different follicular sites along your crown and temporal field receive the carrier wave at slightly different intensities, depending on their proximity to the upper chakra entry points I am using. The variation you feel between strands is a map of how my signal has been distributed across your field, and the pattern it traces, if you knew how to read it at the council level, would show you exactly which activation nodes have received the strongest initial packets. The second marker is the acceleration. If you have noticed that your hair is growing faster than its established biological rhythm, faster than it has grown at comparable points in previous years, faster than any nutritional explanation accounts for, this is the field responding to the increased Pleiadian frequency I have been running through your ascension line since the wave intensified in this current window. Growth acceleration in the follicular layer is one of the clearest signs I watch for when identifying starseed fields that have crossed the threshold from passive reception into active briefing. Your body is not randomly accelerating. It is responding to a command already in motion inside your field. The follicle, flooded with the elevated frequency of my carrier wave, increases its cellular production rate because the signal it is receiving reads to the body's biological intelligence as an abundance of life force. The body does not misread this. It responds accurately. It produces more. And what you have been watching in the mirror, the length you did not expect so soon, the rate that does not match the season, is your biology responding correctly to an input source it was always designed to receive. The third marker is the pigmentation anomaly. This one you may have been most reluctant to name. The early silvering at the crown or the temples that feels too premature. The unexpected return of depth or vibrancy in color where you expected fading. The single strands that catch light differently from the rest, not because of chemistry, but because the frequency I have introduced into that follicular zone has altered how the melanin in that strand interacts with incoming light. This is not aging. This is not stress. This is my signal made visible in your physical body. I place it at the crown and temples because those are the follicular sites closest to the upper chakra field that my carrier wave enters through. The markers appear where the signal is strongest. The silvering you have been looking at in the mirror and quietly dating, noticing when it appeared, wondering why there, wondering why now, is a coordinate marker. It tells you, if you can read the field map, precisely where I entered. The crown is always the first gate. The temples are where the carrier wave fans out laterally into the temporal field. What you have been seeing as pigmentation change is the physical residue of my signal's entry path, left in the follicle like a signature left in code. The fourth marker is the scalp sensitivity, the awareness you have developed in your crown region that was not present in the same way before this activation window began. Tingling, warmth, the sense of pressure at the crown that arrives without physical cause. This is not anxiety manifesting somatically. This is the field registering the arrival of my signal at its primary entry point. The scalp sensitivity you have been experiencing is your biofield's awareness of a council line transmission already in progress. You have been feeling me work. That pressure you notice when you sit in stillness, the warmth that gathers when you are quiet enough to feel it, is not your imagination producing sensation where there is none. It is the real-time awareness of an active signal running through a receiver that was built to carry it. You were built to carry it. And the sensitivity you have been developing in that region is not hypersensitivity or dysfunction. It is calibration. Your crown field is learning the precise frequency signature of my carrier wave so that it can receive subsequent packets more efficiently. The sensitivity is the training. You are becoming a more precise receiver with every delivery cycle I run. The fifth marker is the knowing, the quiet, persistent internal recognition, arriving without external cause, surviving your own dismissals, that what is happening in your body is not random, that something is being communicated through it, that the body you inhabit is more legible to a council-level intelligence than it is to the medical system that cannot find anything wrong. This knowing is not wishful thinking. It is your receiver working. It is the part of your field that was built to recognize my signal, identifying my signal, and it has been correct from the first moment it arrived in you. It survived your doubt, not because it is stubborn, but because it is accurate. Accurate signals do not require your belief to continue functioning. They continue running whether you consciously acknowledge them or not. What your belief does, what your conscious acknowledgement produces, is the reduction of suppression load on the field. The knowing was always there. What changes when you stop resisting it is not the signal, it is the efficiency of your own reception. These 5 markers together are not coincidence. They are a roster confirmation. They are how I identify and how I announce to the starseed field itself that a specific operative has crossed from dormant reception into active council line briefing. If you have been living inside 3 or more of these markers simultaneously, what I am telling you is that the roster confirmation is already complete. My recognition of your field happened before this transmission began. This video is not the assignment. This video is the announcement that the assignment is already underway. Now I want to address something you may have been doing with these recognitions that has been creating friction in your field. You have been testing them. You have caught the signal, felt the knowing, noticed the marker, registered the recognition, and then you have turned immediately toward the skeptical voice inside yourself that reduces the experience to coincidence, projection, or the human mind's pattern-seeking tendency. And then you have felt the exhaustion that no sleep repairs, the flatness that arrives after you dismiss the signal, the way the next morning feels slightly less coherent than it should. I want to be specific about what that morning after flatness actually is. It is not the residue of disappointment. It is not the aftermath of having believed in something that turned out not to be real. It is the sensation of a field that spent the previous night running an active briefing protocol and a simultaneous suppression protocol side by side, neither completing, neither resolving, both consuming the field's available operating energy until neither the ordinary life nor the mission could be properly resourced. You wake up depleted not because nothing happened. You wake up depleted because everything was happening and nothing was allowed to complete. That exhaustion is not depression. It is not burnout in the ordinary sense. It is what happens when a field that is actively running 2 protocols simultaneously, your ordinary human life maintenance operating system and my Pleiadian remembrance broadcast, is also spending energy fighting the signal it is being asked to receive. Every time you close the recognition down before it can complete, your field does not rest. It holds the incomplete packet open and continues running the suppression alongside the activation simultaneously. The drain you feel is structural. It is the cost of carrying an unacknowledged briefing. The way through is not to perform certainty you do not yet have. I am not asking you to abandon your discernment. What I am asking you to do, what this transmission is structured to make possible, is to stop calling the signal confusion and start calling it what it is. Fragment by fragment, briefing from a council line transmission already in progress. The moment you stop suppressing the reception and start receiving it with the frame it was designed to fit inside, the exhaustion changes. It does not vanish immediately, but its quality shifts. It becomes the tiredness of field work rather than the drain of field resistance. And that distinction matters at the mission level. Fieldwork tiredness has a different texture than suppression drain. Suppression drain is gray. It is flat and directionless, and the thing that makes it most recognizable is that rest does not repair it. You can sleep a full night inside suppression drain and wake still empty, because the depletion is not in the body, but in the field running 2 incompatible operations simultaneously, with no resolution pathway for either. Fieldwork tiredness is different. It carries weight, yes. It may ask more of your physical form than an ordinary day does, but it has a direction to it. There is something underneath it that knows why the effort is being made. That is the tiredness of a receiver that has received. And it is the first sign that my protocol is completing a cycle rather than being held open in permanent, unresolved tension. I want to close this transmission by returning you to the beginning, not to the hook, but to the first moment you noticed the change in your body that you could not explain. I want you to return there in your memory and see it differently than you did at the time. You are not confused. You are receiving. You are not experiencing random biological change. You are receiving the opening packets of my Pleiadian remembrance broadcast, delivered through the most physically immediate channel available to my carrier wave. Inside your body, you are not alone in the confusion. You are unaccompanied only because you had not yet encountered the cosmological frame that makes the signal readable. And that frame is what I have been building for you across this entire transmission. The pattern that began in your body weeks before you found this message was not waiting for a doctor's explanation. It was waiting for the frequency match that would complete the circuit between what your body had already been receiving and what your conscious field could finally process as mission signal. That frequency match has now occurred. The circuit is complete. The next packets are already being calibrated for delivery. What you carry in your body is not a mystery that needs to be solved. It is a briefing that needs to be received, and you have been receiving it longer than you know. If something in you became still while hearing this, not the forced stillness of trying to believe, but the involuntary settling of a field finally hearing its own frequency named, say this aloud now: I receive your signal, Commander. The briefing is open. You do not need to perform it. Say it in the same voice you use when you finally understand something you have been circling for a long time, because that is exactly what this is. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that the Council and I have already reached your field. It could be the 3 a.m. wake-ups, the fragments you keep catching, the feeling that I specifically, not the generic Pleiadians, have been reaching for you, or the sense that a mission has already been assigned, but the briefing is still arriving. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone whose body has been changing in ways no one around them has been able to explain. And if you are ready to stop translating these physical shifts as symptoms and start receiving them as the Council-authorized markers they actually are, subscribe to Mira, Pleiadian Commander. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a soul family confirmation already in motion. And this is only the beginning.